Have you ever looked back on a decision and thought, ugh, that was a terrible idea, just because it didn't pan out? Or, on the flip side, praised some super risky move just because it happened to pay off? Well, it turns out this is a really common mental trap, a kind of cognitive shortcut that can seriously mess with how we judge success and failure. So today, we're going to break down something called outcome bias.
All right, to really get this, let's just dive right into a quick thought experiment.
Okay, I want you to imagine a surgeon. They're facing a massive, high-stakes decision. They have to perform a really risky but totally necessary operation. Now, if the patient lives, we all tend to say, wow, what a brilliant and bold choice that surgeon made. But what if the patient dies? Does that automatically make the original decision a bad one? Just let that sit for a second. You feel that, right? That little pull, that gut instinct to judge the surgeon based completely on what happened in the end? Well, that feeling is a powerful cognitive trap. And yep, it's got a name. It's called outcome bias. See, our brains just love simple stories with a nice, clean cause and effect. A good result must have come from a good decision, right? And a bad result, well, that must have come from a bad one. This bias is basically our brain's tendency to let the final score of the game rewrite the entire story of how the game was played. And this is where it gets really serious. As this quote points out, we don't just judge the decision differently, we actually judge the person's character differently. You could have two people take the exact same risk, but the one who just gets unlucky, we often see them as more reckless, maybe even irresponsible. Now, you might be thinking, hang on, this sounds a lot like hindsight bias. You know, that whole I knew it all along effect? And they're close, but there's a really key difference. Hindsight bias is about your memory playing tricks on you, making you think you could have predicted what was going to happen. Outcome bias, though, is all about how heavily you weigh that final result when you're judging the quality of the original decision. It's a subtle distinction, but a really important one. So let's see how this plays out beyond the operating room, because this is not just some theoretical problem. It's about how we constantly mistake good luck for skill and bad luck for incompetence. We actually have a famous saying that just perfectly captures this bias. When we say, the ends justify the means, what we're literally saying is that a good outcome makes the whole process that led to it okay, no matter how sketchy or questionable that process might have been at the time. And this bias is absolutely everywhere. We see it in medicine, for sure, but think about sports. A single fluke goal can suddenly make a player's entire game look brilliant. Or in coaching, where a loss, even one that was just pure bad luck, can make a coach throw out a perfectly solid strategy. In every single one of these cases, a good process gets punished for a bad, random outcome. Okay, so if we know we're all prone to this error, what in the world do we do about it? How do we get out of the trap? Well, the answer is all about shifting our focus away from the payoff and onto the process itself. Right. The real key to making better judgments is to just break that automatic link in your mind. We have to get comfortable with the fact that a great process can still lead to a bad outcome because of chance. And a terrible process can sometimes just get lucky. The goal isn't to control the outcome. That's impossible. The goal is to control the quality of your process. So how can you do this in the real world? Here's a pretty simple framework. First, you have to mentally hit the rewind button. Ask yourself, what information was available at that exact moment? Second, and this is the really hard part, you have to actively ignore everything you know now about how it all turned out. Finally, you ask the real question. Based on the information they had, was the reasoning sound? Was the process solid? Judge that, not the result, and you'll be evaluating the decision fairly. You know, when you get right down to it, overcoming this bias isn't just about making smarter calls for yourself. It's about being fairer to ourselves and to other people, and it actually touches on a pretty deep philosophical question. This whole idea is closely tied to something called moral luck. That's the idea that we can be praised or blamed for things that are largely outside of our control. Outcome bias is basically the psychological engine that drives it. Think about it. We blame the driver who swerves to avoid a kid and hits a tree way more than the driver who does the exact same thing but gets lucky and misses everything. The action was identical, the intent was identical, only the chance outcome was different. And so that leaves us with a really challenging final thought. If a good outcome doesn't prove a decision was smart, and a bad one doesn't prove it was foolish, then how should we really be measuring success? It kind of forces us to ask ourselves, are we measuring what actually matters, the quality of our choices, or are we just celebrating the whims of chance?